You may keep the Carlisle jewels, you may even keep my name, but you will not raise that child beneath my roof." Isabella did not answer at once. At 7 months pregnant, she stood on the opposite side of her husband's desk, with one hand resting beneath the curve of her stomach. The child moved as if disturbed by the silence between them. Duke Edmund Carlisle did not look away. 3 weeks of whispers had brought them here. 3 anonymous letters claimed Isabella had received Captain Frederick Vale privately, while Edmund was believed to be abroad. Servants had supposedly seen Vale entering through the garden. A coachman claimed to have carried him to Carlisle House after dark. Sir Malcolm Reed, Edmund's political adviser, had warned that even the appearance of adultery could damage the parliamentary alliance Edmund had spent 2 years building. Isabella had answered every accusation with the same request. "Check the dates." Edmund never had. She reached behind her neck and unclasped the emerald necklace he had given her on their wedding night. 4 years earlier, Edmund had fastened it there himself and whispered that Carlisle House finally felt like a home because she was in it. Now the emeralds landed softly on his desk. "I need neither your jewels nor your permission to remain your wife." His jaw tightened. "You misunderstand the situation." "No, I understand it perfectly." She met his eyes. "You believe I betrayed you. I believe there is enough doubt that I cannot ignore it." "Then investigate it." "I have." "No, Edmund. Other men whispered into your ear, and you called that an investigation." A shadow passed across his face. Isabella had spent years managing portions of his private correspondence. Dates, ledgers, and dispatches were not mysteries to her. She knew precisely when Edmund had returned from France because she had recorded correspondence dictated by him after his arrival. More importantly, she knew when their child had been conceived. "The accusations say Frederick visited me while you were abroad," she said. "You returned to England earlier than publicly announced. You know that. My official return was March 20th. Your official return," she emphasized the word. "You entered through Dover on March 12th and spent 2 nights at Harcourt Lodge because you wanted your political opponents to believe you were still in France. You were back in this house before the date on which these people claim I conceived another man's child." Edmund's expression shifted. For one hopeful second, Isabella thought she had finally forced him to confront the obvious contradiction. Then he said, "Dates can be disputed." Something inside her went still. "I have your correspondence. That proves where I was. It does not prove where Vale was. I can show you the letters." I said enough. There it was. Not uncertainty. Choice. He was being offered evidence, and he did not want it. Isabella slowly nodded. "You are not afraid the child belongs to Frederick." Edmund's eyes sharpened. "You are afraid of discovering that you humiliated your wife for nothing. That is not what this is about." "It is exactly what this is about." The study door opened before he could respond. Sir Malcolm Reed entered carrying several documents tied with a black ribbon. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace. The solicitor requires these before he returns to London." Malcolm stopped when he saw Isabella. "My apologies, Duchess." Isabella barely heard him. Her attention had fixed on the ribbon. For years she had organized Edmund's family papers herself. Carlisle documents involving inheritance, settlements, guardianship, or succession were traditionally bound in black. She looked at Edmund. "What are those?" "Estate business." "What estate business?" Malcolm intervened smoothly. "Routine protections, Your Grace." Isabella turned toward him. "I asked my husband." Edmund covered the top page with his hand. "You leave for Greythorn tomorrow morning." That answer frightened her more than if he had shouted. "Am I being sent away as your wife?" she asked, "or as the mother of a child you intend to deny?" Malcolm's expression barely moved. Edmund's did. "We will discuss the child when the facts are clearer." "The facts are already clear. You simply refuse to look at them." "Isabella." "No." Her voice remained quiet. "You do not get to send me away and call your cowardice caution." Edmund rose. For the first time, anger broke through his composure. "You will not speak to me like that." "Then give me a reason to respect the man speaking." Silence struck the room. Even Malcolm looked away. Edmund's face hardened. "You leave at 8. Isabella stared at the man she had once trusted with every vulnerable piece of herself. After her first miscarriage, it had been Edmund who sat on the floor beside their bed and held her while she cried. He had wept too, his forehead pressed against her hand, and promised that if they were ever blessed with another child, neither of them would endure the fear alone. Now she was carrying that child, and he was banishing them both. "Will Dr. Whitmore travel with me?" she asked. "No. Dr. Hargreaves will attend you at Graythorne." Her composure finally cracked. "You dismissed my physician? I replaced him. Dr. Whitmore has attended this pregnancy from the beginning. And Hargreaves is perfectly competent. You did not even ask me. I am responsible for this family." Isabella gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You are questioning whether the child is your family while claiming authority over how I deliver him." Edmund flinched. It was tiny, but she saw it. Then Malcolm cleared his throat. "The solicitor is waiting, Your Grace." Isabella looked again at the black-bound papers. Edmund noticed. He turned them face down. That movement told her everything she needed to know. There was more happening here than exile. "Let me see them." "No. If they concern my child, I have a right to know. They concern Carlisle. I am the Duchess of Carlisle. For now, this conversation is finished. For now." The words landed differently from everything else. Isabella lowered her hand to her stomach. "Very well." She walked toward the door. "Isabella." She stopped without turning. Edmund's voice was quieter now. "Until this matter is resolved, you will not correspond with Captain Vale or anyone concerning the child's legitimacy without my knowledge." She looked back. "You are sending me away, replacing my physician, controlling my letters, and refusing to read evidence that might prove your own son is innocent of the accusation you have placed upon him." Edmund said nothing. Isabella's eyes shifted to Malcolm. He was standing beside the desk, one hand resting almost casually near the black-bound documents. And suddenly she understood something important. Malcolm wanted her gone. But Malcolm was not her husband. Malcolm had not made vows to her. Malcolm had not conceived this child with her. Whatever lie had entered Carlisle House, it could only destroy her marriage, because Edmund had chosen to believe it. She faced him one last time. "If you discover that you were wrong, do not tell yourself another man made you do this." Then she left. By dawn, the nursery had been closed. Isabella took none of the embroidered blankets bearing the Carlisle crest, and none of the silver gifts prepared for the expected heir. Instead, she packed a plain leather dispatch case. Inside were copies of Edmund's correspondence from the week of his secret return, household accounts bearing dates he could not easily deny, and several letters that had once seemed too ordinary to matter. She had spent years maintaining Carlisle records. Edmund had apparently forgotten what that meant. Isabella had not. Mrs. Finch helped her into the carriage shortly before 8. Edmund did not come outside. As Carlisle House disappeared behind them, Isabella felt her child move again. She rested both hands over him. "I do not know what your father intends to call you," she whispered, "but no one will erase who you are." At Graythorne, 6 weeks later, she gave birth shortly after midnight. A son, Thomas Edmund Carlisle. Edmund was not there. No message arrived the following morning. None arrived the second. On the 5th day, Isabella received something far more revealing. Her solicitor sent a hurried note from London. A document concerning the Carlisle succession had quietly been circulated several weeks before Thomas's birth. Isabella read the first paragraph, then the second. Her hand began to shake. Attached was a copied extract bearing Edmund's genuine signature. There was no forged seal, no anonymous accusation, no uncertainty about who had written it. 2 weeks before banishing his pregnant wife, Edmund himself had formally declared that serious doubts existed concerning the paternity of her unborn child, and had authorized preparations to protect the Carlisle succession should the baby's legitimacy be challenged. Below Edmund's name appeared another, the man positioned to inherit if Isabella's son was rejected, Lord Julian Carlisle, Edmund's cousin. Isabella stared toward the cradle. Thomas slept peacefully, one tiny hand curled beside his face. The anonymous letters had wounded her marriage. But Edmund's signature could take something far greater from her son, his name, his inheritance, his future. Isabella folded the document and placed it inside her leather case. She no longer intended to persuade her husband to believe her. She was going to make the truth impossible for him to deny. The first thing Isabella did was not accuse Lord Julian. Motive was not proof, and she had already suffered enough from a husband who could not distinguish between the two. Instead, she asked Mrs. Finch to bring every letter that had arrived since Thomas's birth. They covered the small writing table at Greythorn. Isabella sorted them by sender, date, postmark, and seal, while Thomas slept beside the window. 4 years of managing Carlisle correspondence had taught her that important frauds often hid inside unimportant details. Her attention stopped on an envelope received 3 days earlier. It bore Edmund's private seal. The letter instructed the Carlisle solicitor to prepare for the possibility that Lord Julian might become heir presumptive if Thomas's legitimacy could not be established. Isabella read it twice. The wording sounded like Edmund at his coldest, but something bothered her. She held the envelope closer to the window. The crest was correct. The lettering was correct. The seal was not. Edmund's silver signet had a tiny damage along the lower edge, created years ago when he dropped it against the stone hearth. Every impression it produced carried the same broken line. This one was perfect. Someone had copied the Carlisle seal. Mrs. Finch watched her expression change. "What is it?" "This letter did not come from my husband." "Are you certain?" "I have sealed hundreds of his letters." Isabella turned the envelope toward her. "Someone wants the world to believe Edmund is continuing to act against Thomas." Mrs. Finch looked toward the cradle. "Lord Julian? Perhaps, but wanting him to be guilty would make me no wiser than Edmund." She placed the forged letter beside the document bearing Edmund's genuine signature. The difference between them was almost cruel. One was evidence that someone was conspiring against Thomas. The other proved that his own father had opened the door. That afternoon another problem emerged. The parish clerk had come shortly after Thomas's birth to complete the baptismal arrangements. Isabella had expected the certified entry to arrive several days ago. It had not. She sent a servant to inquire. He returned alone. "The clerk says the entry exists, Your Grace, but he cannot issue the certificate." "Why?" "He received instructions from Carlisle House." Isabella went still. "What instructions?" "He would not give them to me." "Then tomorrow he can give them to me." She went herself. Recovering from childbirth made the carriage journey uncomfortable, but Isabella refused to allow another messenger to stand between her and Thomas's identity. Reverend Andrew Cole received her privately. The older man looked deeply uneasy. "Your son was properly entered," he assured her. "Nothing has been removed from the parish register." "Then why was I denied his certificate?" He hesitated before unlocking a drawer. "This arrived 6 days after the birth." He placed a letter before her. Carlisle stationery, Edmund's crest, Edmund's seal. The instructions stated that questions had arisen regarding the child's parentage, and requested that no certified copy of Thomas's baptismal entry be released until the Duke of Carlisle's solicitors confirmed his status. Isabella examined the wax. Perfect. Too perfect. Another copied seal. Who delivered this? A gentleman's servant. Name? He gave none. Did anyone else inquire about Thomas? The Reverend hesitated. That hesitation frightened her more than the letter. Yesterday a gentleman came from London. What did he want? To inspect the register. Did you allow it? I allowed him to see the entry. Isabella gripped the edge of the table. What happened? He then requested that the page be removed temporarily and sent to London for examination. Isabella stood. Removed? I refused. Who was he? He called himself Nathan Bell. He claimed to represent the Duke's solicitor. I know my husband's solicitors. There is no Nathan Bell. The Reverend went pale. Isabella leaned toward him. No page containing my son's name leaves this church. If the Duke himself comes demanding it, you send for me first. You have my word, and I want a certified copy today. Reverend Cole looked toward the false instruction. I was expressly told, that order is forged. His eyes widened. You are asking me to disregard the Duke of Carlisle. No, I am asking you to disregard a man pretending to be him. Minutes later, Isabella walked out carrying the first certified copy of Thomas Edmund Carlisle's baptismal entry inside her coat. She did not relax until it was locked inside her dispatch case, but she did not keep the only copy there. That evening, she sent a second certified copy to her own solicitor in London and asked Reverend Cole to preserve another independently. If someone came searching Graythorne, Isabella wanted them to discover that destroying one piece of paper would accomplish nothing. Then she wrote to Samuel Price. Samuel had once been a junior clerk under Isabella at Carlisle House. He possessed none of Malcolm Reed's charm and none of Julian's social importance, which was precisely why people rarely noticed him. He noticed everything. Her message contained only one instruction: compare all letters concerning my son against the Carlisle Dispatch Registry. Tell no one. She did not seal it with the Carlisle crest. 2 days passed. On the third morning, Samuel's reply arrived, hidden inside an ordinary account from a linen merchant. Isabella opened it beside Thomas's cradle. The legitimate Carlisle correspondence followed its usual numerical sequence. The letters concerning Thomas did not appear anywhere in it. Neither did the instructions sent to the parish. Someone possessed Carlisle paper and a replica of Edmund's seal, but lacked control over the internal registry. Then she reached Samuel's final paragraph. During the month before Isabella had been banished, 12 sheets of Edmund's private stationery had been released to Sir Malcolm Reed's political office. Only 7 had been returned. 5 were missing. Isabella slowly lowered the letter. Malcolm had access, Julian had motive, and Edmund had supplied them with the one thing neither man could forge convincingly enough on his own: his public distrust of his wife. A carriage stopped outside Graythorne. Mrs. Finch entered moments later. "Your Grace." Her expression was strange. "What is it? The Duke?" Isabella rose too quickly and caught the edge of the cradle for balance. "Edmund is here?" Mrs. Finch nodded. "He says he wishes to see his son." His son. Isabella looked down at Thomas. For 6 weeks Edmund had not witnessed the fear of childbirth. He had not heard Thomas's first cry. He had not spent the sleepless nights wondering whether the infant was breathing. And now, after signing a document that allowed other men to question whether Thomas belonged to him at all, he had arrived expecting to see him. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Edmund appeared at the open door. He looked thinner than she remembered. His gaze passed over Isabella and immediately found the cradle. Something in his face broke. He took one instinctive step forward. Isabella moved between him and Thomas. "No." Edmund stopped. "I came to see the child. His name is Thomas." His jaw tightened. "Isabella, before you touch him, answer one question." She removed the forged parish instruction and placed it on the table. "Did you order a priest to withhold your son's baptismal record?" Edmund picked it up. His confusion came almost immediately. "No. Look at the seal." He did. Then he looked at her again. "I never wrote this." "I know." Those 2 words changed the room. For the first time since he had thrown her out, Edmund was not the man holding information she needed. She was. Isabella opened her dispatch case and placed the forged letter beside Samuel's registry notes. "Someone has been writing in your name, interfering with Thomas's records and preparing Julian to replace him." Edmund stared at the documents. Then Isabella placed one final paper on top. His genuine declaration, his own signature. "But this," she said, "is real." Edmund's face went still. "You gave whoever is doing this exactly what they needed. You made the lie believable." Before he could answer, the sound of a horse galloping hard into the courtyard cut through the room. Seconds later, someone pounded on the front door. Samuel Price entered without waiting to be properly announced, his coat covered in road dust. He was carrying a document. "Your Grace." He looked first at Isabella, then uneasily at Edmund. "Lord Julian has arrived at Carlisle House with a solicitor." Edmund frowned. "For what purpose?" Samuel swallowed. "To challenge Master Thomas's place in the succession." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Samuel held out the document. "And he says he now has a signed confession from Captain Frederick Vale, proving the child is his." For several seconds, no one spoke. Edmund was the first to take the document from Samuel. The statement claimed Captain Frederick Vale had been Isabella's lover while Edmund was supposedly abroad, and that Vale had reason to believe Thomas might be his son. At the bottom was Frederick's signature. Edmund read it once, then again. Isabella watched his face. "Do you believe it?" "I don't know." 3 words. That was enough to reopen every wound he had caused. Isabella held out her hand. "Give it to me." Edmund hesitated before surrendering the page. She studied the statement and immediately noticed the date. May 17th. Frederick was in Portsmouth. Edmund frowned. "How can you be certain?" "His sister wrote to me after he left London. That proves where she believed." Isabella looked up sharply. "Stop." Edmund fell silent. "You did this before. Someone gives you an accusation. I give you a contradiction, and you immediately search for a reason. The accusation might still be true." His face tightened. "I am trying to establish facts." "No, you are still trying to protect the decision you already made." Thomas began crying upstairs. The sound traveled down the staircase. Edmund looked toward it. Isabella did not. "Frederick's whereabouts can be verified," she continued. "Your own return can be verified. This document can be examined. But none of that changes what you did before anyone had proof." Edmund looked down at the confession. For once, he did not defend himself. Samuel broke the silence. "Lord Julian has gathered several family trustees and neighboring gentlemen at Carlisle House. He wants the matter discussed before witnesses." Isabella immediately understood. "This isn't an investigation." "No, Your Grace, it is a performance." Julian wanted the accusation repeated publicly until Thomas's name became inseparable from scandal, whether he ultimately proved anything or not. Edmund moved toward the door. "I will return to Carlisle House and stop him." "We will return." "No." The answer came so naturally that Isabella almost laughed. Edmund realized his mistake. "Thomas is barely 6 weeks old. You sent me to Graythorne when I was 7 months pregnant. That journey was different." "Because you ordered it?" Edmund had no answer. Isabella called for Mrs. Finch. "Prepare Thomas for the carriage." Edmund stepped closer. "Isabella, if Julian intends to make this public, bringing you there may worsen the scandal." She turned on him. "Hiding me here is what made his story possible." Her voice remained controlled, which made the words strike harder. "You removed me from my home. You missed your son's birth. You allowed everyone at Carlisle House to assume there was something shameful about my pregnancy. Julian is not creating that appearance now, Edmund." She looked directly into his eyes. "He is using the one you created for him." An hour later, they left for Carlisle House. Thomas slept in Isabella's arms for much of the journey. Edmund sat opposite her, unusually quiet. When the baby woke, his small face tightened before he began to cry. Edmund watched Isabella soothe him. "May I hold him?" She looked up. It was the first thing he had asked rather than commanded since arriving at Graythorne. After a moment, Isabella handed Thomas across the carriage. Edmund took him awkwardly. Thomas quieted almost immediately, his tiny fingers closing around Edmund's index finger. The Duke stared down at him. "He has my father's chin." Isabella felt something twist painfully inside her. "He had it the night he was born." Edmund closed his eyes. There was nothing Isabella could have said that would have punished him more effectively than the 6 weeks he had missed. When Carlisle House finally appeared, they found more than Julian waiting. 5 carriages stood outside. Inside were 2 trustees connected to the family settlements, several relatives, a solicitor, Sir Malcolm Reed, and enough respected witnesses to ensure that whatever happened would spread through the county before morning. Julian Carlisle stood beside the fireplace. His expression changed when Isabella entered carrying Thomas. "Isabella." "Your Grace," she corrected. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Edmund stepped forward. "This gathering is over." Julian did not move. "I am afraid it cannot be, cousin. You have produced an unverified statement from Vale, and used it to question my son." "Your son?" Julian glanced around the room. 6 weeks ago, you were considerably less certain." Edmund went still. Julian turned to the solicitor. The man removed a document from a black folder. Isabella recognized it before he even opened it. Her stomach dropped. Not Frederick's confession. Something worse. The solicitor began reading. The document declared that serious doubts existed concerning the paternity of Isabella's unborn child and authorized appropriate measures to protect the Carlisle succession until legitimacy could be established. Then came the signature. Edmund Carlisle, genuine. Julian looked at the assembled witnesses. I did not accuse the Duchess first. His eyes settled on Edmund. Her own husband did. Silence filled the room. Isabella looked at Edmund. This was the moment the entire conspiracy became horribly clear. Whoever had forged the letters had not needed to forge the most damaging document of all. Edmund had signed it for them. Julian stepped toward the cradle in Isabella's arms. Until this matter is resolved, no one here can reasonably assume that child is the lawful Carlisle heir. Edmund's face darkened, but Isabella spoke first. No. Every head turned toward her. She handed Thomas carefully to Mrs. Finch. Then she walked to the table, took Edmund's declaration from the solicitor, and held it up. You are correct about one thing, Lord Julian. Julian smiled. Isabella looked at her husband. This document is genuine. Edmund visibly flinched. And that is exactly why I intend to use it. Julian's smile disappeared. Isabella placed Edmund's declaration flat on the table. You want this document to prove Thomas is illegitimate, she said. It proves nothing of the kind. Julian's solicitor frowned. The Duke himself expressed doubts regarding the child's paternity. Doubt is not evidence. She turned to Edmund. When you signed this, had you spoken to Captain Vale? No. Had you examined the correspondence proving when you returned to England? Edmund's jaw tightened. No. Had you questioned me? A longer pause. No. Had anyone presented proof that I committed adultery? No. The admission passed through the room like a cold draft. Isabella faced the witnesses. My husband signed this because his pride was wounded, and because men he trusted told him there might be a scandal. Lord Julian is now attempting to transform Edmund's failure to investigate into evidence against a 6-week-old child. Julian stepped forward. That is an elegant speech. It does not explain Captain Vale's confession. No, so let us examine that instead. She placed the supposed confession beside the declaration. May 17th. That is the date Vale allegedly signed it. His presence in Portsmouth can be independently established. Malcolm Reed finally spoke. If it can, Isabella turned toward him. She had almost forgotten how smooth his voice could be. It can. Malcolm smiled faintly. Then perhaps everyone should wait for proof rather than accepting your recollection. The irony was almost offensive. You showed my husband anonymous accusations and encouraged him to act without proof. I advised His Grace to protect his family. No, you advised him to protect his reputation. Malcolm's expression hardened, only slightly, but Isabella saw it. Julian interrupted before she could press further. None of this changes the obvious question. If there is uncertainty, the succession must be protected until it is resolved. Isabella looked around the room. Protected from whom? Julian frowned. My son is an infant, yet before his birth, my husband was persuaded to sign a document questioning him. After his birth, someone forged Edmund's seal to interfere with his baptismal record, and now the man who benefits if Thomas is rejected has gathered witnesses to announce that rejection publicly. Her gaze settled on Julian. If anyone in this room requires investigation, cousin, it is not the baby. Julian's face changed. For the first time, Isabella knew she had frightened him. Edmund saw it too. He stepped toward Malcolm. Who first brought you the accusation concerning Vale? Malcolm remained composed. I would have to consult my records. Then consult them. I will. Now. A silence followed. Malcolm's eyes flicked briefly toward Julian. It lasted less than a second. Isabella caught it. So did Edmund, but she refused to mistake a glance for proof. Not after what had been done to her. She gathered the documents. This discussion is finished until Captain Vale is located. Julian laughed once. You believe you can simply dismiss this? No. Isabella looked toward the surrounding guests. I believe you have already achieved what you came here to do. Several lowered their eyes. By tomorrow, people would be whispering about Thomas in drawing rooms, clubs, and dining halls. Even if Isabella proved every accusation false, scandal traveled faster than correction. She turned to Edmund. "I want rooms prepared for Thomas in the East Apartments. The family nursery is ready." "No." His expression tightened. "He is my son, and when I was carrying him, I was your wife." Edmund had no answer. "Mrs. Finch remains with him. No one enters our rooms without my permission. This is Carlisle House." "Yes." Isabella met his eyes. "The house you expelled me from." Edmund stood motionless for several seconds. Then, in front of everyone who had just witnessed his humiliation, he nodded. "Give the Duchess whatever she requires." It was the first authority he had returned to her. It did not resemble forgiveness. That night, Isabella put Thomas to sleep herself. Only after Mrs. Finch locked the outer door did she open her leather dispatch case. Inside lay the documents she had brought from Graythorne: the certified baptismal record, Samuel's notes, the forged parish instruction, and copies of Edmund's correspondence surrounding his secret return. She removed one letter dated March 14th. Edmund had written it from Carlisle House, 2 days after returning secretly from France. Unlike Isabella's memory, it could be authenticated independently because the recipient, a tenant named Mr. Fenwick, had answered it. If Fenwick still possessed that reply, Julian's timeline would begin to collapse. Isabella prepared a note for Samuel. A sound came from the corridor. She stopped. Someone tested the door handle. Once, then again. Mrs. Finch appeared from the adjoining room. Neither woman spoke. The footsteps eventually retreated. Isabella looked at the dispatch case. Someone knew she had brought evidence back into Carlisle House. She closed it immediately. The next morning she woke to Thomas crying. Mrs. Finch was already beside the cradle. "He is well," she whispered. Relief lasted only seconds. Then Isabella saw the writing desk. The leather dispatch case lay open. Its lock had been forced. She crossed the room. The jewelry beside it had not been touched. Neither had her money. Someone had taken only the documents connected to Thomas: the March 14th letter, the copy of his baptismal record, Samuel's registry notes. All gone. For the first time since the accusations began, Isabella had not been one step ahead. Someone else had been waiting for her to make exactly the move she had just made. Edmund reached the East Apartments within minutes. When he saw the broken dispatch case, anger overtook him. "I'll question every servant in this house." "No." Isabella's answer stopped him. Someone entered a locked room, ignored money and jewelry, and took only documents concerning Thomas. They knew exactly what they wanted, which means the thief is inside Carlisle House, or someone inside helped them. Edmund looked toward the corridor. Malcolm, perhaps. Julian, perhaps. Isabella closed the empty case. "But I will not destroy someone because suspicion feels convenient. I know what that looks like." Edmund understood the rebuke. This time he accepted it. Fortunately, the thief had not destroyed everything. Isabella had left another certified baptismal record with Reverend Cole, and copies of several documents remained with her solicitor, but the March 14th letter proving Edmund was already in England was gone. More importantly, whoever had stolen it now knew exactly how Isabella intended to fight. "We need Frederick," she said. If Captain Vale appeared publicly and denied the confession, Julian's strongest accusation could collapse immediately. Edmund sent 2 trusted men to locate him. Isabella sent Samuel separately. By evening, both returned with the same answer. Frederick Vale had disappeared. His London lodging had been emptied. His regiment believed he had gone to Portsmouth. Portsmouth had no record of his current residence. No one had heard from him in weeks. Edmund stared at the supposed confession. If they forged this and then made him disappear, do not finish that sentence without evidence. Edmund looked at her. Even now she would not commit the same sin he had. The next morning, evidence of a different kind arrived. A newspaper lay beside Edmund's breakfast. The headline was small but devastating. "Succession uncertain at Carlisle." The article stated that the Duke of Carlisle himself had formally questioned the legitimacy of his expected heir before the child's birth. It mentioned Isabella's alleged association with an unnamed military officer. It did not need to name Thomas. Everyone would understand. Edmund crushed the paper. "I will have them retract it." Isabella took it from him and smoothed the page. Which part? He stared at her. The allegation. They reported that you questioned Thomas. I did. They reported that you signed a declaration. His silence answered. You did. Edmund looked away. Only now did he understand the trap. Julian did not need every forged document to survive scrutiny. He had Edmund's real signature. I can issue a statement, Edmund said. Then issue the truth. His eyes returned to hers. Publicly acknowledge Thomas? No. Isabella placed the newspaper on the table. Publicly acknowledge what you did to us. Edmund stiffened. That would damage the family politically. A bitter smile touched Isabella's mouth. There it is. He fell silent. The Carlisle name mattered more than your wife when you sent me away. Now you must decide whether it matters more than your son. She left him with the newspaper. That afternoon Samuel returned from London. He had found the man who managed Frederick's former lodging. The captain had not left voluntarily. 2 men had come for him 6 weeks earlier after purchasing a private debt in his name. One of them was Nathan Bell, the same man who had attempted to remove Thomas's baptismal record. Where did they take Frederick? No one knows, Samuel said, but he left something behind. He handed Isabella a torn piece of paper discovered behind the writing desk. Only one sentence remained legible. I will not lie about the Duchess, no matter what Lord J. The page ended there. Isabella stared at the unfinished name. Julian. Perhaps, but still not proof. Then Samuel gave her the worst news. Your Grace, Lord Julian has formally requested that Thomas not be recognized in any Carlisle succession arrangements until the accusation is resolved. When? 3 days from now. Isabella looked toward the newspaper carrying her disgrace across England. Her evidence had been stolen. Her principal witness had vanished, and now Julian had given her a deadline. For the first time, Isabella did not know whether she had enough time to save her son's name. Nathan Bell proved easier to trace than Frederick. Samuel discovered that Bell had recently purchased Frederick's modest gambling debt from its original creditor. The amount had been less than £200. Yet the document now being enforced against Frederick demanded nearly $3,000. Someone had transformed an embarrassing debt into a weapon. The address attached to the claim led Isabella to a private lodging house in London, where debtors were sometimes kept while financial disputes were settled. She went with Samuel and her solicitor. Frederick was there. When Isabella entered the small upstairs room, she barely recognized him. His coat hung loosely from his shoulders, and several weeks of confinement had hollowed his face. He stood abruptly. Isabella, she remained near the door. Did you sign a confession claiming Thomas could be your son? No. Were we ever lovers? Never. She had known the answer. Still, hearing it released something painful inside her chest. Then why are you hiding? Frederick looked toward Samuel and the solicitor. Leave us. Isabella shook her head. They remain. He gave a tired laugh. You have changed. My husband made trusting without witnesses a luxury I can no longer afford. Frederick accepted that. He explained that Bell had approached him shortly after Isabella's pregnancy became the subject of gossip. At first, Bell wanted only a statement confirming Frederick had visited Carlisle House while Edmund was believed to be abroad. Frederick refused. Then came the money. Then threats. Finally, Bell purchased Frederick's real debt and produced a new document claiming he owed thousands. Why not go to Edmund? I tried. Frederick crossed the room and opened an old book. Inside was a copy of a letter addressed to the Duke of Carlisle. I wrote twice. Edmund had received neither. Isabella immediately understood. Malcolm controlled much of Edmund's political correspondence. She read the copy. Frederick had warned Edmund that someone was attempting to manufacture a scandal involving Isabella. The letter was dated before Edmund banished her. If it had reached him, everything might have been different. But another line caught Isabella's attention. Bell repeatedly implied that Lord Julian would protect those who cooperated. She looked up. This is why Julian wanted you gone. Partly. Frederick's expression changed. There is something else. From beneath the mattress, he removed another letter. It was addressed to Frederick. Inside was a single warning. If he publicly denied the affair, an old debt belonging to his late father would be enforced against the small house where Frederick's unmarried sister lived. Isabella understood immediately. You stayed silent to protect Eleanor. I can survive prison for debt. His voice roughened. She has nowhere else to go. Isabella looked at her solicitor. If Frederick testifies for me, can Julian take her home? Not directly. But if the underlying claim is legitimate, he may create enough litigation to ruin her before we defeat him. Frederick turned to Isabella. I will testify if you order it. Order it! You are fighting for your son, and Eleanor is your sister. If I remain silent, Julian wins. Isabella stared at the letter. This was exactly what Julian expected. Force one innocent person to sacrifice another. She folded the paper and returned it to Frederick. No, he blinked. Isabella, I will not save Thomas by throwing Eleanor into the street. Then what will you do? Find another way. For the first time since entering the room, Frederick looked genuinely shaken. You may not have time. Then I will work faster. Before leaving, Isabella asked one final question. Did Belle ever tell you why Julian was so determined to remove Thomas? Frederick hesitated. He said Julian had already made plans based on becoming Carlisle's next heir. What plans? I don't know. But Belle once told me something strange. Isabella waited. He said your husband would do the hardest part for them. The words followed Isabella all the way back to Carlisle House. Edmund would do the hardest part. Of course he had. Julian had not needed to forge Edmund's distrust. He had only needed to feed it. When Isabella returned that evening, Edmund was waiting in the study. Did you find Vale? Yes. Then we have him testify. No. Edmund stared at her. Why? Because Julian is threatening his sister, and I will not destroy another woman to repair what you helped do to me. We have 3 days. I am aware. If Vale can clear your name. My name? Her voice sharpened. Is that what you think this is still about? She stepped toward him. Thomas is fighting for a name he was born with, because his father signed it away before giving his mother one honest hearing. Edmund went still. Then Isabella noticed the document on his desk. A formal notice. The family trustees would hear Julian's challenge in 2 days. Attached to it was a copy of Edmund's declaration. Again, always Edmund's declaration. Isabella looked from his signature to the man who had written it. Suddenly she understood what she needed next. Not another hidden letter, not another stolen ledger. She needed Edmund to destroy the single piece of evidence Julian could never be accused of forging. His own. What do you mean, destroy my own evidence? Edmund asked. Isabella placed his declaration between them. Julian's entire challenge rests on one fact no one can dispute. You doubted Thomas first. I can withdraw it. That is not enough. Edmund understood what she was asking. You want me to admit publicly that I was wrong. I want you to tell the truth publicly because you damaged us publicly. Before he could answer, Samuel entered. He had returned with information from Frederick's original creditor. The real debt was £187. The £3,000 note used to silence Frederick was false. More importantly, the payment purchasing Frederick's debt had come through an account connected to Julian. Edmund's face darkened. That connects him to Vale, and Nathan Bell connects him to the forged accusation, Isabella said. We have enough to challenge Julian. What we do not have is enough to undo you. A servant interrupted. Sir Malcolm was attempting to leave Carlisle House. Edmund moved immediately. Stop him. They reached the entrance hall before Malcolm entered his carriage. Going somewhere? Edmund asked. Malcolm remained calm. London. Parliamentary business. 2 days before the succession hearing. Malcolm's eyes flicked toward Isabella. Edmund noticed. So you knew about it. Everyone knows about it. Did you know Nathan Bell purchased Captain Vale's debt? For the first time, Malcolm hesitated. Only a second. Enough. Edmund stepped closer. You brought me the accusations. You controlled my correspondence. Vale wrote, warning me that someone was manufacturing evidence, yet I never received those letters. Malcolm's composure finally cracked. You signed the declaration willingly. Edmund stopped. Malcolm realized too late what he had said. Isabella did not. Yes, she said. Both men turned toward her. That is the first completely honest thing you have said. Malcolm looked confused. Isabella continued. You could forge letters. You could buy Frederick's debt. You could copy Edmund's seal. But you still needed my husband to believe the worst of me. Edmund lowered his eyes. Malcolm smiled faintly. And he did. Edmund lunged forward. Isabella stepped between them. No. Move, Isabella. No. He used me to destroy you. And you let him. The words stopped Edmund more effectively than force. You do not get to become the hero of a disaster you helped create. Silence filled the entrance hall. Malcolm's smile disappeared. Isabella turned to him. You will remain available for questioning. If you run, you will look exactly like what you are afraid we can prove. Then she walked away. Edmund followed her back to the study. For several moments neither spoke. Finally, he said, if I publicly admit I acted without evidence, Julian loses the strongest argument he has. Yes, my political allies may abandon me. Yes. The newspapers will say the Duke of Carlisle accused his own wife of adultery because he was too proud to investigate. Isabella looked at him. Will they be lying? Edmund had no answer. She moved toward the door. Behind her, his voice came quietly. Isabella. She stopped. I thought protecting the Carlisle name meant preventing scandal. She looked back. And instead, Edmund glanced at the declaration bearing his signature. I became the scandal. For the first time, there was no excuse in his voice. Isabella left him alone with the document. The following morning, before breakfast, Edmund summoned his solicitor, his secretary, and representatives from 2 London newspapers. Isabella watched their carriages arrive from the upstairs window. Mrs. Finch stood beside her, holding Thomas. What is His Grace doing? Isabella did not look away, finding out whether his remorse is worth anything. Downstairs, Edmund sat before a blank sheet of paper. For the first time since this began, telling the truth would cost him more than telling a lie. And this time, Isabella would not make the choice for him. Edmund's statement appeared in the London newspapers the following afternoon. It was brief. It named Thomas Edmund Carlisle as his legitimate son. It declared that the accusations against Isabella had never been proven. And, at Isabella's insistence, Edmund included the sentence his advisers begged him to remove. I questioned my wife and child without examining evidence she offered me, and the responsibility for that decision is mine. He blamed neither Malcolm nor Julian. By evening, the consequences had begun. 2 political allies postponed meetings. A prominent supporter withdrew from the parliamentary alliance Edmund had spent years building. Letters arrived asking whether a man who had mishandled his own household could be trusted with public affairs. Edmund read them without complaint. Isabella found him alone in the study. You knew this would happen, he said. Yes. And you still demanded it. No. She placed the newspaper before him. I demanded that you choose. You finally did. He looked at her. Does it change anything between us? No. The answer hurt him. Isabella did not soften it. Doing what is right after doing something cruel does not purchase forgiveness. Edmund lowered his eyes. I understand. This time, she believed he might actually mean it. A knock sounded. Samuel entered carrying a message. The hearing begins tomorrow morning. Julian was proceeding despite Edmund's public acknowledgement. That told Isabella something important. This is no longer about convincing Edmund, she said. Julian needs Thomas discredited whether Edmund cooperates or not. Samuel nodded. And Sir Malcolm? Still at Carlisle House. But his correspondence rooms have been sealed. Edmund stood. Then tomorrow we finish this. Isabella looked at him. No. Tomorrow I finish it. He started to object, then stopped. What do you need from me? The question mattered more than he realized. Tell the truth when you are asked. Nothing more. He nodded. Later that evening, Isabella organized what remained. Not dozens of papers. Only what could be proved clearly. Edmund's secret return to England. The false confession attributed to Frederick. The original creditor's record showing Frederick's debt had been altered. Payments linking Julian's interest to Nathan Bell. The forged Carlisle seal. And Edmund's genuine declaration. The very document Julian believed would destroy Thomas. Isabella intended to let him use it. Shortly before midnight, Mrs. Finch brought one final letter. It was from Frederick. Isabella opened it. Eleanor knows everything. She refuses to let Julian use her home to make me lie. I will appear tomorrow. Whatever happens afterward will be my choice. Isabella read it again. She had refused to sacrifice Frederick. Now Frederick had chosen for himself. The following morning, the hearing room was already crowded when Isabella arrived carrying Thomas. Julian stood beside his solicitor. Malcolm sat farther back. Edmund entered behind Isabella, but did not walk ahead of her. Julian noticed. His smile was cold. "You have made quite a spectacle in the newspapers, cousin," Edmund answered calmly. "The spectacle began when I believed you." For the first time, Julian's confidence slipped. Then the trustees called the hearing to order. Julian's solicitor rose and placed one document on the table. Edmund's declaration, exactly as Isabella expected. The Duke of Carlisle himself questioned this child's paternity before birth. Isabella stood. "Yes," she said. A murmur moved through the room. Julian smiled. Isabella picked up the document that had nearly destroyed her son. "My husband's signature is genuine." She looked directly at Julian. "And before this morning is over, that genuine signature will help prove exactly how you built your lie." Isabella left Edmund's declaration on the table. "Your argument begins with this document," she said to Julian, "so let us begin there." She turned to Edmund. "When you signed it, had you spoken to Captain Vale?" "No." "Had you examined the dates I offered you?" "No." "Did you possess proof that Thomas was another man's child?" Edmund looked directly at the trustees. "No. I had accusations and my own wounded pride. I treated them as proof." Julian's solicitor shifted uncomfortably. Isabella continued. "The accusation depended on my husband supposedly being abroad when my relationship with Captain Vale occurred." Samuel placed Edmund's travel records before the trustees. Edmund had secretly returned to England on March 12th. Independent correspondence confirmed he was at Carlisle House by March 14th. The first foundation of Julian's story collapsed. Julian remained calm. "That proves Carlisle returned early. It does not prove the Duchess was faithful." "Correct," Isabella said. "So let us ask the man you claim was my lover." The doors opened. Frederick Vale entered. Julian went pale. Frederick walked to the table. "I never had an affair with the Duchess. Thomas is not my child, and I never signed this." He held up the confession. Julian recovered quickly. "A disgraced debtor denying adultery proves very little." Frederick almost smiled. "I expected you to say that." Samuel placed the original creditor's account beside the forged debt. £187 had become 3,000 after Nathan Bell acquired it. "And who paid Bell?" Isabella asked. A payment record was produced. The money had passed through an account connected to Julian's business interests. Silence spread across the room. Julian turned toward Malcolm. "This was Reed's arrangement. If documents were forged, ask him." Malcolm stared at him. It was exactly the mistake Isabella had been waiting for. "You told us Nathan Bell had nothing to do with you," she said. "Now you know Malcolm arranged business with him." Julian froze. Malcolm slowly stood. "You said the Duke would never examine the accusations." Julian turned sharply. "Be silent." "You said Isabella would be sent away before she could compare the correspondence, Malcolm. And you said once the child was doubted, no one would care whether Vale's confession was genuine." Julian lunged toward him. Edmund stepped between them. This time Isabella did not need to stop her husband. The room had already heard enough. Malcolm looked around and seemed to understand that Julian intended to sacrifice him, so he continued. The replica Carlisle seal had originally been created to forge Edmund's political correspondence. But when Isabella announced she intended to resume managing her husband's records after the birth, she became dangerous. Then Julian saw another opportunity. If Isabella could be disgraced and removed, Malcolm's fraud remained hidden. If Thomas could be declared illegitimate, Julian remained next in line. One lie solved both problems, but none of it would have worked, Malcolm said bitterly, looking at Edmund. "If you had believed your wife." Edmund absorbed the words without flinching. "I know." Julian slammed his hand on the table. You are taking the word of a fraud and a debtor over mine? No, Isabella said. She stepped toward him. We are taking your payments, your false confession, your attempt to silence Frederick and your own contradictions together. Then she picked up Edmund's declaration. And this was the cleverest part. Julian said nothing. You knew Edmund, her voice quieted. You knew his pride. You knew his political ambitions. You knew that if you made him fear humiliation strongly enough, he might punish me before asking whether I was guilty. She looked briefly at her husband. And you were right. Edmund lowered his eyes. But you made one mistake. Julian stared at her. You thought that because my husband abandoned me, I would become helpless. Isabella placed the declaration down. I did not. The trustees withdrew only briefly. When they returned, the senior member spoke plainly. Nothing presented against Thomas provided a credible basis for questioning his legitimacy. The alleged confession was repudiated by the man whose name it bore, while the surrounding evidence showed deliberate fabrication and coercion. Julian's challenge was rejected. Isabella heard almost nothing after that. She turned toward Mrs. Finch. Thomas was asleep in her arms. His name was safe. Edmund moved as though he wanted to approach Isabella, but stopped himself. Across the room, Julian and Malcolm were being separated and ordered to remain available while the forged documents and financial transactions were referred for formal investigation. Julian looked at Isabella with pure hatred. She felt nothing. He had tried to take her reputation, her child's future, and her place in her own family. He had failed. But when Isabella finally looked at Edmund, she knew the hardest question had never been whether Thomas would remain a Carlisle. It was whether she still wanted to be one. The consequences did not require another hearing. Once Malcolm's correspondence and Julian's financial accounts were examined, the rest of their scheme unraveled quickly. The forged seal, altered debt, and payments to Nathan Bell were turned over for formal investigation. Malcolm lost his position and every privilege Edmund had given him. Julian was removed from Carlisle financial affairs, and the scandal that was meant to destroy Isabella attached itself instead to his own name. But Isabella took no satisfaction in watching them fall. Thomas was safe. That was enough. Edmund's punishment was different. His political alliance fractured after his public confession. Men who had once praised his judgment now questioned it. The newspapers repeated his admission that he had accused his pregnant wife without examining the evidence she offered him. Edmund did not attempt to suppress any of it. He had spent months protecting the Carlisle name at Isabella's expense. Now protecting her name required sacrificing his own. 1 week later, he asked Isabella to meet him in the same study where he had banished her. The emerald necklace still rested in its case. Beside it were several legal documents. I have secured Graythorne's income for your independent use under the settlement, Edmund said. There is also a separate provision for Thomas that cannot be controlled through my political advisors. Isabella read them carefully. You prepared all this without requiring me to return? Yes. And if I remain at Graythorne? Nothing changes. She looked at him. Months earlier, he would have dictated every condition. Now he waited. I cannot become the wife I was before this, she said. I know. I loved you enough to believe that when everyone else turned against me, you would be the one person who asked for the truth. Pain crossed his face. I know. You were the first person who refused to hear it. Edmund lowered his eyes. He did not ask her to forgive him. That, more than any apology, told Isabella something in him had finally changed. I am returning to Graythorne tomorrow. His face tightened, but he nodded. And Thomas? Comes with me. Another pause. May I visit him? When I invite you. Edmund accepted it. The following morning, Isabella walked down the steps of Carlisle House carrying Thomas. The same carriage that had once taken her away in disgrace waited below. This time her belongings were packed, because she had ordered them packed. Edmund stood beside the carriage. He held Thomas for one final moment. The child grabbed his finger. Edmund smiled, but his eyes were wet. When he returned Thomas to Isabella, he did not try to delay her. Will you ever come home? He asked quietly. Isabella looked back at Carlisle House. The enormous stone facade had once represented everything she believed she possessed. Marriage, family, security, belonging. Then she looked at her son. "Thomas and I were your home, Edmund." His expression broke. "You were the one who sent it away." She climbed into the carriage. Edmund remained where he was. He had kept his title. He had kept Carlisle House. He had even recovered the certainty that Thomas was his lawful son. But none of those things gave him the right to recover Isabella. That would require something evidence could never prove, and remorse could never demand. Trust. The carriage began moving. Isabella did not look back again. Thomas slept against her chest as the gates opened before them. Months earlier, Edmund had told her that she would not raise the child beneath his roof. Now Isabella passed beyond that roof by her own choice, and this time no one was sending her away.